Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for your interest. So I'm Nawel Ouzren, I'm the CEO of Sensorion, which is a French biotech company which is listed on the Euronext Growth, so that's the disclaimer. So Sensorion, we were created in 2009, and we are a spin-off of the French NIH, the French INSERM, and we are specialized in the development of therapeutics for hearing loss. And we are building a portfolio of products to restore, prevent, and treat hearing loss. 10 years after the creation of the company, it has been really a transformational year in 2019 because of, or thanks to the signature of a transformational strategic agreement with Institut Pasteur, which is one of the top academic institutions driving the science of hearing, and really with the leadership of Professor Christine Petit, has identified gene therapy programs to improve and hopefully reverse the phenotype of monogenic forms of deafness. Thanks to that transformational strategic agreement, we completed the biggest capital raise since the creation of Sensorion. We raised last year 43 million euros, and we brought in sophisticated institutional investors to support the company. So we had Invus and Sofinova partners who were leading the rounds, and they came into the board. We also hired John Free, who was the Chief Operating Officer of Spark Therapeutics. He's an independent board member and is really guiding our efforts in the development of our gene therapy portfolio. On top of this dilutive financing, we were also successful in getting non-dilutive financing. We received 9.6 million euros to fund our first gene therapy program that was licensed from Institut Pasteur. It was a highly selective process, and we were really grateful to be selected. 62 companies actually applied, and only 15 received the non-dilutive financing. And just before Christmas, we also received non-dilutive financing from the French government to finance actually our most advanced program, which is currently in phase 2. So what's so special about hearing loss? So hearing loss is actually due to the health of an important organ, which is the inner ear. It's a very delicate organ. It's very small in size, and that's the only organ in the body when you lose the cell, you lose the function. It does not regenerate. So we have to do everything we can to preserve our capital. So we are born with a limited number of sensory hair cells, and if you have like strong noise, you can have, for example, also ototoxic medications that will lead to, unfortunately, the loss of these sensory hair cells, and that will lead then to permanent hearing loss. That's the reason why, over the last 10 years, we really focused our efforts to develop this pipeline in hearing loss to treat, prevent, and now reverse hearing loss. So the most advanced program, which is called Sensorion, it's a 5-HT3 antagonist, but what makes it very special, it's a calcineurin inhibitor program. So it means that it really has the ability to slow down the apoptotic process of the sensory hair cell. And remember what I told you, we are born with a limited number of sensory hair cells, and it's very important that we can really slow down so that we can preserve our process. We feel pretty strongly about the mechanism of action of Sensorion because we have demonstrated in several preclinical models that it was truly an anti-apoptotic. We demonstrated it in a noise-induced hearing loss, and also in a cisplatin-induced ototoxicity model, as well as aminoglycosides. So in the first indication, that is the most advanced, it's currently in phase 2, and we expect data readout by mid-year this year. The last pillar that we built is actually coming from the Institut Pasteur collaboration. We licensed 2 gene therapy programs with Institut Pasteur, and these are monogenic forms of deafness, and what we are trying to do is really reverse the phenotype of deafness when babies are being born deaf. So on top of the pipeline, thanks to the scientific leadership of the team, we've been successful in also building an ecosystem of really top players within the field of hearing loss. So we started with Cochlear actually in 2017. Cochlear, it's the market leader in cochlear implants. They were very interested in our Sensorion program because they want to actually see if they can, in combination with our drug, maintain hearing before and after cochlear implantation, which is a very invasive surgery. We brought in Institut Pasteur. We also now working very closely with Necker Hospital, which is the biggest pediatric hospital in Europe, and it's also the reference center for monogenic forms of deafness. We are currently working with them to build a natural history for our gene therapy programs. And lastly, actually, in December, we announced a strategic also partnership with the French military, which is going to actively participate in our Sense401 sudden sensory neural hearing loss program. So let's dig into our treatment pillar. So the first indication that we are pursuing, it's called sudden sensory neural hearing loss. It's a rare disease. It impacts around 200,000 patients in the US and in EU5. So it happens abruptly. So let's imagine it's me. It happens unilaterally in one ear, and in 60% of the cases, it's irreversible. People do not recover their hearing. Today, the standard of care is very poor. There are no standard of care. People, some doctors will prescribe steroids, but we know it's not very effective. So the drug that we are developing, it's called Sense401. It's a 5-HT3 antagonist, but what makes it very special, as I said, it's the calcineurin inhibitor. We completed in 2018 the phase 1. We demonstrated that the drug was very safe. We have, of course, IP up, and the IP protects the asset up to 2036. We also received the orphan drug designation from Europe, which will bring additional exclusive period. And we are currently running our phase 2 globally. It's under IND and all around Europe. And most importantly, now we have the military, the French military, that will participate. So that's the design of our current phase 2. So the patients that are suffering from acute hearing loss will be randomized over three arms, 2 drugs arms versus placebo. And we will treat these patients for 28 days, twice a day, and the drug is taken orally. And there will be a follow-up up to day 84. And the primary endpoint that we will be measuring is auditory, and we have to demonstrate at least 10 decibel improvement versus placebo. And we know that at least in our preclinical model, that was the minimum we demonstrated. We expect the phase 2 data readout by mid-year this year, so it's going to be a very important catalyst for the company. In terms of prevention, I spoke about Cochlear, that was an early evangelist, for Sensorion. Since 2017, we're working closely with them to try to maintain hearing before and after cochlear implantation. Why is it important for them? There were actually very important publications that demonstrated that there was a disproportionate risk to develop dementia if you were suffering from hearing loss. And what they are trying to do, Cochlear, is actually change standard of care, in particular for aging people, so that cochlear implants becomes more standard of care. So that's what we are doing with them. And the last pillar that we built actually in the mid of last year, in 2019, is this restoration pillar with this strategic partnership with Institut Pasteur. So Institut Pasteur is one top academic institution driving the science of hearing. They were the ones that identified most of the genes responsible for congenital deafness. We performed the due diligence, and we liked 2 programs that were very advanced and ready to enter preclinical. The first one is to treat Usher type 1 syndrome, which is a very severe disease, and the second one is for otoferlin deficient people. What's very important is that beyond the licensing of these 2 gene therapy programs, we secured an exclusive access of everything that will come up from Pasteur at pre-agreed terms. So you need to think about Institut Pasteur like almost the preclinical arm from a gene therapy perspective for Sensorion. So the Usher type 1 syndrome, as I mentioned, it's a very severe disease. The babies are born bilaterally deaf, and they are born without vestibular function. So what it means is that the parents actually notice that something is going wrong because the baby has difficulties to hold his or her head. They are delayed in learning to crawl. They have difficulties to learn to walk. And very sadly, around the age of 10 years old, they become blind. So they are deaf, they are blind, and they have trouble actually walking. It's due to a genetic disorder, so they are missing actually the SENS protein, and what we are doing with Pasteur is trying to restore this SENS protein so that hopefully we can reverse the phenotype. Today, the diagnosis is actually very poor. We think it's probably underdiagnosed, and there is the only standard of care that exists today is cochlear implantation. The epidemiology that we're currently having is it's a rare disease. It's around 26,000 babies suffering from Usher type 1 in Europe and 15,000 in the US. As we speak, we're working with the Necker Hospital to run a natural history to improve that epidemiology. The second program that we license from Institut Pasteur is for otoferlin deficient babies. In this case, the babies are born bilaterally deaf, and they have a defective gene that is called DFN-B9, and they are missing a protein that is called otoferlin. So what we are doing here also, Institut Pasteur, is to restore the protein. With a dual AAV2 strategy, and they published data last year that were pretty impressive and that really wowed the medical community, where they fully reversed the phenotype and changed the severity of the disease, moving the mouse from being severely profoundly deaf to actually normal hearing. So as I mentioned in my introductory comments, 2019 has been transformational. We did the biggest capital raise. 2020 will be also very critical for the company with a big data readout for our Sense401 program. We will be also progressing our gene therapy programs. We will have confirmatory proof of concept in animal data and also non-human primate, which are going to be very important to engage with the regulatory agencies on what the clinical trial phase 1-2 will look like. So the clinical and the company catalysts for 2020. So we will have the Sense401 SSNHL phase 2 data readout. We will have proof of concept data for the gene therapy, for the Usher type 1 and the otoferlin. And we will have also the intermediate and final data readout, preclinical data readout with the Cochlear collaboration. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to take any question.